Welcome to Injector Confidential, a podcast by injectors for injectors. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Kristen. Welcome back, guys. Thanks for hanging in there with us. If you're new to the podcast, like Nicole said, we're a podcast by injectors for injectors. And our goal is to be your aesthetic big sisters and let you know everything in the industry that we wish we would have known coming into it, as well as what we've learned as experienced aesthetic injectors. So thanks for being on the ride.
And we are not gatekeepers, so that is really the backbone of it. We want you to know everything. My boyfriend always tells me there's 2 rules in business, and the first one is don't say everything you know. And that means there's no second rule. He makes that joke and he's like, you say too much. I'm like, I don't say too much. I want people to know. I want people to succeed. So that's
Oh my
really
gosh,
the
I just
backbone.
got it. I just got the joke.
That's how long it took me for me too, because I literally was
God.
waiting and he was staring at me after he told me. And I was like, what's the second one? And he was like, he's probably like thinking, you have a doctorate. What are you not?
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
I'm just a little blonde that way. My blonde money piece really makes an appearance in my personality that
that's
way.
hilarious.
So if you're coming back, if you're binging, that's amazing. But if you're binging and you're coming from last week and you're wondering if we are okay, we're doing much better this week.
We're off the struggle bus.
We're off the struggle bus. Both of us have a little bit of makeup on. I would say both of us have clean hair, but that's not true for me. I'm on day 7.
Oh, it looks good.
Well, thank you. That's a whole bucket of dry shampoo. But we are having a much better week this week. We really just needed last week to be in our feelings. I would say that from Monday, last week was just rough. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe it was my perception of it, but from the time, I would say the next day was probably better because I slept. But last week, I just really needed to recharge by the end of it.
Yeah.
But Kristen had an awesome event on Saturday.
Yeah, I did. It was really good. It was a Babes Empowering Babes event, and it was put on by one of our provider success managers and myself. And it was so great. We had the dried floral arrangement girl and candles, and it was just a really fun time to just get people together. There was a fairly good turnout. And something that we're going to start doing quarterly just to kind of bring people together, have an easy self-care day for people.
I think that you've hit all the highlights as far as things that make people feel good. Pretty things that go on walls.
Yeah.
Nice smells. Next time I'm going to have you buy some candles for me and I'll pay you back. Or I'll just come.
They were
I'll be able to come this time.
so good.
You know me.
So good.
Kristen and I both in our studios, we both always burn candles. It's just a vibe.
Yeah.
But the difference is that Kristen's ceilings are a lot higher than mine. And I so badly want to burn sage. Like all of last week, I was like, I just need to sage the shit out of my studio, but I'm afraid of setting off the fire alarm.
Yeah. I remember the first time I smudged and you were like, how do you not set off the fire alarms? And I was like, oh, I did not even consider that.
Is it called smudging, not saging?
I think you can say either or.
Okay, I'm not clearly I'm new to this game.
Yeah.
So I didn't smudge, if you will. But okay, so what do we have coming up? So we have our branding photo shoot on Monday.
Yes, guys, we're going to be legit after that. I'm super excited. It's a photographer I worked with before, and she's going to get all our best angles.
I'm afraid my biggest fear is that we're going to have photos where I look good and then maybe you're breaking.
Which is 100% a possibility.
Or you look great and I look like a potato. I'll take one for the team. If I need to look like a potato, that's totally fine.
I'm going to really try to keep my eyes open.
So that's why my hair, I haven't washed it in so long, is because I'm trying to align it with the schedule of the photo shoot, which if you are a once a week hair washer like me, you know the stress that comes with when your hair wash day does not align with your social schedule. It's really stressful.
I bet.
The other good thing that's happened just in time for the photo shoot and just in time to boost my mental health is that my Dysport has totally kicked in.
Yeah, you look good.
That's all thanks to you, baby. That's all thanks to you.
It looks good.
Kristen and I have both talked about this before on our social media, but there's actual true evidence that Botox and Dysport improve mental health and help with depression as an adjunctive treatment, which I think is so cool. And it's the dang truth, mate.
Yeah, God, no joke. Besides just the physiological research that's out there, I think just the mental part of
look good, feel good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So today, this episode, I think after last week and as we're getting settled into running our own practices and client communications and getting into our groove, we really want to share what we've learned and points and talk about boundaries.
Dun, dun, dun.
I know. Hopefully, we don't lose you at that.
Yeah. Well, let me give this caveat. Hopefully, by the end of this episode, you see the benefit in having them,
Mhm.
and that if you have not been good at setting boundaries, keeping boundaries, maintaining them, communicating them, just know that there is always time to learn a new skill. And we hope that this adds value to your practice and to just your relationships and life in general.
And we're not only going to talk about like what boundaries are, we're also going to talk about how to know when your boundaries are being violated, how to install them, what to expect, how it affects you personally versus professionally. And yeah, I'm really excited to share what we know. This is a tough one, I think for everyone, but I think especially as women, it's hard because we're just innate caregivers and nurturers and want to go bend over backwards, especially as healthcare workers. But I'm so grateful to have Kristen as my pseudo therapist because she gave so much good insight when we were prepping for this episode. So she's going to take it away to start us off.
So I think it's good if we set a definition of
Yeah,
boundaries.
always.
So, our working definition for this podcast episode is going to be guidelines, rules, or limits that a person creates to identify reasonable, safe, and permissible ways for other people to behave towards them and how they will respond when someone passes those limits. Love that definition.
Love that. And it's like so concise, but the key word for me there is safe.
Yes.
Boundaries for me are about safety, but they're also about how you allow people to treat you.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
love that definition. Along with self care manifesting, lots of things that we like to talk about. Boundaries are trendy. And we feel like they're sometimes, it's one of those things that gets glazed over as like a piece of advice is have boundaries. But what does that mean? What does that look like in your practice as an aesthetic injector? What does that look like? And how does it differ from your day to day life?
Absolutely. And we'll be talking about it in the sense of whether you own your own practice or you work for a med spa setting, whatever it is, because those boundaries may look different. And we can see that when we have personal boundaries versus business boundaries. So when we have personal boundaries, we have a little more autonomy. You can really set a pretty rigid boundary to say, you know what, this person can no longer be a part of my life. And while we may have that flexibility with some patients when it comes to firing patients, which is a topic for another time, you don't always have that ability when it comes to your coworkers or to your boss or the different dynamics that happen in a workplace environment. And so if, let's say personally, you're going to set a boundary, you would maybe say, I'm no longer going to be friends with this person. Like I'm cutting off contact. And that's okay. You have every right to do that. It's feasible. You have the autonomy and the ability to set that for yourself. But professionally, if it's a coworker that you're having issues with, that may not be the choice for you. So you may have to say something more like, I will only speak with this person in person and in the setting of work. So that's a boundary, whether it's spoken or unspoken. Either is okay. There's different types of boundaries. And even having an unspoken boundary with yourself in difficult workplace relationships can really improve your quality of life.
And it really affects how your maturity is perceived if you go to your boss and then you have not dealt with the person that you have a problem with, you have not approached them one-on-one, which I will acknowledge for 99% of the population is a really scary thing to have confrontation. But if you go to your boss and you have problems and you say it's either me or them, the ultimatum thing never works in your favor. They may choose you, but they will never forget that you put them in that position.
Totally.
Of course, this does not apply to being sexually harassed, being bullied. Like those are special scenarios. In the terms of boundaries with this, we're talking about how you function on a day-to-day basis, not if you are being like abused in the workplace. I just want to make that very clear.
Absolutely. And same goes with by patients, whatever. Like yours, as we said before, your safety is absolute top priority.
Totally. So, why do you need boundaries? We talk about them all the time, but why are they important? So, boundaries are actually a form of self care and knowing and exerting your self worth. Really do protect you from burnout in the long run. I like to think of boundaries almost like your personal force field that people cannot get
Mm.
past. You are behind that force field, and anybody tries to go through it, they get bounced right back off.
Oh, I like that.
That's a good visual. I like a visual. And boundaries also invite respect. When you respect yourself, other people will inherently respect you and respect your time more. And
Absolutely.
and then Kristen made a really interesting point, so she gets to talk about this one.
So, boundaries help us create a safe space for our patients and ourselves. And so, we're going to talk a little nervous system
I'm in. I'm
stuff.
ready.
So,
My nerd hat is on.
here we go. Buckle up, bitches. So, our nervous systems are designed to respond to people and situations that we are in or close by. And basically, we can mirror each other's nervous system regulation. So, I'm sure you guys have all felt it before. Maybe you're having a decent day, but then you walk into the office and you instantly feel the fight or flight. Maybe there's some toxicity. You just sense the energy and instantly your energy has changed. Or maybe you feel that when you walk and greet a patient for a consult and they're nervous or they're sometimes overtly hostile. Instead of it impacting your nervous system, you can choose and learn the skills of how to regulate your own so you can be grounded. And instead of them rubbing off on you, you can rub off on them. And truly, just by taking a couple of deep breaths, reminding yourself that you're safe and that you're in control, you can shift the entire feel of the appointment. And where this also is beneficial is specifically with social media. So if you are just kind of mindlessly scrolling your Instagram and you just jump right into your DMs and all of a sudden you're bombarded with people wanting to schedule, wanting to ask what your prices are, and you're not in the space where you can protect your boundaries, you're going to show up in a way that's not authentic. It's not a true reflection of who you are. You're going to feel drained mentally and emotionally. And you're not going to be attracting your ideal client within your responses. So if you can take time, nothing emergent should be communicated with your patients in the DMs. That should be made very clear in their appointment.
It's like the worst form of
Oh
communication.
my gosh, but patients are like
They
really
love to
hooked on
slide
it.
into the DM.
Totally. And so I would say if you really set that boundary, you get yourself in the right mental space, and then you go and check your DMs, you're able to show up in a way that is much more in alignment with your values and who you are as an injector. And so basically the core piece of this when it comes to why you need them, it's because it's for your mental and emotional well-being. It's for interpersonal relationships. It's you're worth it. You're worth
Totally.
setting what you want for your life and deciding that and sticking to it and having the people in your life be the ones that respect that.
And I think that one of the biggest things, and Kristen can agree or disagree, people are afraid to set boundaries. So therefore they don't.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's hard. I mean, it's a tough thing. When you're used to doing something and you have that expectation with yourself, or it's known like this is not true. But for example, oh, Nicole always will respond to me at 3 a.m. It's hard to be that girl that says, no, now I'm no longer responding to emails at 7 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say this is a little off topic, but I think that within this culture of aesthetics, one of the things I love about it so much is it's full of hustlers, bosses, entrepreneurs, people that work night and day and maybe even work several different roles because they love the industry so much and they will do anything to be a part of it, grow their business. But that also leads to a really unhealthy expectation of what's normal within
Mm-hmm.
this industry.
Absolutely.
An injector that I actually admire, she posted saying, and I don't think it was self deprecating, I think that it was actually true. She said, if I tell you that you can talk to me at any time, that means I will email you back at 3 a.m.
Oh
And
my
I was just like,
gosh.
that was when I was a newer injector too, because I was like, oh my God, that's not me. But I think that there's such a fear of setting boundaries when maybe that's the company culture, and we'll talk about that too. But the major thing is that I think that people fear is people's response and their pushback. So
Mm.
something that really helped me when I was learning to set boundaries within my personal life in my 20s is I had a therapist that told me that when you are setting boundaries, you are changing this infrastructure of how you relate with people. And, our bodies want homeostasis. We want things to stay the same. When things change, there's always a reaction and people act out.
Mhm.
That's the same way, like you can see with toddlers. When you change the routine, toddlers don't like that. They don't like their nap time to be messed with.
Me either.
Same here. I don't want you to be 10 minutes late on my lunch time, people. You do not want a hangry ejector.
That's right.
But if you have to just expect that there is going to be pushback, not from everyone, but from some people. And it will become very evident who the people are that are going to give you some issues with this.
Yeah. Have you ever heard that quote that if someone gets upset if you set a boundary, they're the ones that have been benefiting from you not having a boundary?
Oh,
Oh my
Yeah,
god, that is just
it's a good one.
That
Because
is
and these
very
are the type of
revealing.
people you wanna involve in your life and have in your inner circle. Are they people that respect those boundaries? Or are they people who challenge you that they're benefiting from you having no boundaries? And so when you prioritize yourself and your self-care and your self-worth, are they the ones cheering you on in that?
Right.
Or are they the ones holding you back?
Oh, I would
And
love that.
yeah, so it's a good litmus test too for
It's
the
a
people that you
really good
want in your
litmus
life.
test. Yeah, it will require you checking in with yourself and knowing that you're going to have internal discomfort, probably some anxiety, and how you're going to manage that. Kind of prophylactically having a safety plan within yourself for those emotions that will come up with setting boundaries.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point of just acknowledging the boundary that needs to be set, knowing that you need to set it, and then making a plan to care for yourself because there will be that internal discomfort. And it's going to be really hard to not just like back down when you feel that and
Totally.
be like, oh, never mind. Like,
Yeah, I think that that's one place that a lot of people fall short, and then it's really hard because they didn't think about how they're gonna enforce it and how they're gonna take care of themselves, and so they just back down. I'm like, "No, you were so close.
so close.
You were so close."
I can just speak to that because I am the queen of that. I'll get like fired up about something, either in the office or personally. And then I'll be like, this is my boundary. I'm setting it. And then I'll take a nap, eat something. And I'm like, actually, it wasn't that bad. But it's like, you have to listen to your body and to yourself. And if you're,
Totally.
and we're going to talk about how to know when your boundaries are being violated, which I think is a
Totally.
really key piece of this.
Yeah,
But let's talk about boundaries when that is not the company culture.
or the
When,
culture of your industry, like sometimes it
yes.
is with aesthetics.
Yes, exactly right. How do you set boundaries, but not either look lazy or like a bitch?
It's really, really tough,
Yeah,
and I mean, it is not your responsibility to adopt the culture of your company. That's really what it comes down to. You can have self respect and know when you will stop working, what kind of clients you will see, the behavior that you will tolerate. And if it's somebody else's or it happens to be the rest of your company, like that's not your responsibility. You don't need to play into that. It probably wasn't in your contract, but it comes back to, is it time to quit your job? I think that truly boundaries are something and self respect are something that should be celebrated, not looked down upon.
absolutely. I think it's a sign of maturity.
Mhm.
I think it's a sign that you are actually a great employee because you're willing to do what it takes to make sure you are in peak form to then perform. I have a friend that works for a company and she was trying to set some boundaries and her higher up said to her, like, that's great that you're trying to set a boundary, but there's a difference between that and not doing your job. And in the
God.
situation, I was like, that is a boundary. Like outside of all she was trying to do was just set some boundaries as far as like what was working for her and not working for her within her job scope. And, you're going to be easily labeled as someone who might be lazy or just trying to shift work. And let them say it. Let them say it because at the end of the day, your mental health and emotional health is what matters. And it is the biggest sign of self respect to set a boundary for yourself. And yeah, it's worth it, guys.
It totally is. And one of the things too that we talked about is that it's okay if your boundaries are going to change and evolve over time, and especially in your personal life, but particularly in your business life and in your professional life. And at least for me, there is a sense of embarrassment or almost hypocrisy when there is a change, but change is normal. I mean, our lives evolve, our priorities evolve, and with that, our boundaries evolve and how we prioritize spending our time. So it's only natural. Nothing can stay the same.
Totally. And with that, there may be this fear, especially if you're newer to the industry, there may be a fear that if you set a boundary that you're going to lose clients. And when I get in that mindset, I always remind myself of like some of the top injectors. And I think about like different stories I've seen on their Instagrams of like their cancellation policies or their how hard it is to even get an appointment with them and how strict they have to be on what qualifies you to even be available to have to be a patient of theirs.
Yeah,
And I'm like, dude, I feel like the most successful injectors are the ones that actually have the strictest boundaries.
totally. I absolutely agree. And I mean, I know that there are injectors that brag about, I have patients that come and see me from out of state. That's awesome. But guys, I promise I'm not an Erica Berry fangirl. She just does it right for most things. But she has a policy. If you are coming for any treatment, you need to be there for 3 days in
Oh,
the
wow.
DC
In
area.
case there's an a complication.
Correct. And like, yeah, that might cut out the people that see her, but it's all people that are serious and it takes the liability down for her. And I was like, that is insanely smart.
Absolutely, and think about the boundaries that you know that you should be setting in your practice, especially with your patients. And whether it's a cancellation policy, a travel policy, whatever it is that's kind of coming up for you. And yes, there may be that temporary discomfort of setting the boundary, but far less will that be compared to the discomfort of trying to manage a complication from across the US or continually having no shows and continually being harassed on your DMs. And I've said it before, but you teach people how to treat you.
Mhm.
And that is the crux of setting boundaries.
Preach. And I think what it comes down to in aesthetics is there's a fear of losing clients if you change how you are communicating, what times you'll be available, what treatments you'll do. There is a fear of losing clients, but what I will say is that if you get pushback and you lose those clients, it's not a loss to you.
Yeah, those weren't the right ones for you.
No, they're probably the problematic ones. I don't care how much money people spend. If they're problematic and they push me, it is not worth any amount.
No, absolutely. Another key piece of setting boundaries is not only setting boundaries with the people in your life, but also setting boundaries with yourself.
This is harder.
Yeah, it
It's really
totally
harder
is.
to hold yourself accountable.
So some of that might look like not booking people on your days off, taking a break from your Instagram DMs, fitting people in on your breaks or before and after business hours because they just really need their Botox. Like, no, they can come in during the hours that you are scheduled and, you don't have to double book. I mean, obviously if it's an emergency or something, but for just a typical appointment, you don't need to kill yourself. You don't need to double book. You can enforce a cancellation policy that includes a charge. And you can decide when and what you respond to and how you do that. And that is well within your right. And you have that autonomy within aesthetics to be able to do that. And my biggest piece of advice is to make sure you have an employer that supports that.
Oh, totally. And one of my favorite pieces of advice that came from another small business owner who books out 3 months at a time is that she's not open on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday.
Hmm.
It's Tuesday and Friday, 9 in the morning to 5:30 at night.
Hmm.
And sometimes people question it, but you know what she says? People will figure it out. If
Yeah.
it's important to them, they will come in during your business hours.
And what does that teach a patient? You need to pre book.
Right, exactly. And that also goes our last bonus episode. When you get started, you will be working times that are convenient for people. So that shift when you start to get more clientele, you get more autonomy with your schedule. That's really when you might start to see some pushback of, oh, well, I used to always come at 7 p.m. on Friday. Like what's different?
Yes.
Well, my schedule has changed, my hours have changed, and so will your expectations will also have to shift.
Yeah, where I felt that was when I switched over to having my own business because before, if I was setting a boundary, I could always blame it on the place that I was
Totally.
working and
Yeah.
like, this is their policy, these are their hours.
Mhm.
And now, or I could have the front desk person mitigate that situation for me. And then now it has to be like, they know I own my own business. And yes, we're partnered with Portrait, but I don't obviously get into all of that on the day to day. And they just think it's my business. So when I sit there and I'm not haggling prices with them, I'm not double booking them, I'm not giving them a last minute appointment just because they want to. It's a lot scarier because I have no one to pass the buck to and be like, oh, sorry, this is my
Right.
scapegoat. It's
Yeah.
just the office I work for. Patients respond well to it. They understand. And for the most part, the patients that I have now really truly are. I have a practice filled with my ideal client.
Mhm.
And sometimes they encourage me, like, they'll send me a text after hours and I have an automatic response that will go out, little disclaimer, call 911 if you need anything. I'll respond within business hours. But if I'm not doing anything and I'm like up for it, or if it's a client that I feel like I should respond to, I'll respond. And then a lot of times they'll come back and be like, it's Friday night. Like, no, this
Yeah.
could have waited till Monday.
Totally.
And so I appreciate that. And those are the types of patients that my practice is filled with. And thankfully I've been able, through my boundaries, have been able to weed out the ones that really were going to cause me more problems in the long run.
I love that point. You can't pass the buck when it's just you and the Wizard of Oz show that is running her own practices as a one-woman show. So another part of boundaries also comes down to accessibility. And social media has really fucked this for us because it's
Mhm.
added in a whole nother layer of accessibility where we have to set a whole nother set of boundaries. Imagine how much different it would have been in the days of like where you didn't have a credit card swiper and you had to do the little thing.
Yes.
And you had landlines and that's how you booked
Oh my
appointments.
gosh.
That sounds
Actually kinda nice.
it does. Sometimes it sounds kinda nice, right? Oh my god. So except I do like a card reader. I do like a card
Yeah.
reader and tapper that really does streamline things. But anyways, we digress. So what forms of communication will you use with clients? That may sound silly because you're like, well, all of them. Eh, wrong. We've talked about this in before, but I personally have a very strong boundary when it comes to my personal line. My personal line is my number that my friends, my family, and my business and my coworkers can get to me. And then I have a business line where it goes off at a certain time. And that's a really easy way for me to decipher okay, at this point of the day, I'm responding to texts on my personal line. And at this part of the day, I'm also responding to my clients. It's a really easy shut off. I also have an automated message, and I find that's great. But then this morning, Kristen and I were talking about the absolute abyss that are direct messages.
Yeah, and I'll speak to an incident that I had that's leading me to set a boundary, is that I had a patient that was an amazing, total ideal client, has been a patient of mine for years. She had a concern about a treatment that I had done for her like a month previous, and I was like, "Absolutely, come in, let me take a look at it, no worries at all." And in the midst of my busy day, probably read her message, like trying to settle on a date, did not respond to her because you know how it is. Then you read it, it's no longer notifies you that it's hasn't been responded to, and then I get 10 other messages, and
It goes to
so
the bottom of the pile.
totally. And so then I got a message this morning that she was really disappointed and upset, and I lost her business because I never, and it's because it's been a couple months. And that was really difficult to realize, like, oh my gosh, I lost business over a DM. That's really, really hard. And it would be easy to say, well, maybe she just wasn't the right client for me. And I don't think that's true in this case. She really, truly has been such a faithful client for so long. And I had to look at my system. My system is what failed me in that process. And from moving forward, if I just make it very clear that any bookings of any kind need to be done through my business line or my website, because at least my business line has our assistant that can kind of go on and like double check that I didn't miss anything, or the website, they can just do it themselves. This wouldn't have been the case. And so that's leading me to realize, like, okay, there has to be a boundary for me with DMs in scheduling, and also to the amount of effort that I give a established patient compared to a non-patient.
Totally.
I've also changed this. I used to think that I needed to give all my effort and attention to the non-client because I was trying to win their business. And I'm realizing that it should actually be the opposite, that my care, my attention, my focus is really towards my established clients because that's where the loyalty is, like, I mean, that's what pays my bills, honestly. The people that are blowing up my DMs that are not even my patients and expecting an immediate response, and they're asking me, how much Botox do I need? What are your prices? All of that. I just give the same answer, like from now on, just copy and paste of can't wait to meet you. It's best to come get a complimentary consultation where we can come up with a customized treatment plan. Here's my link to book. I look forward to meeting you.
Yeah, I love that. And you and I both have a pretty strong boundary when it comes to I'm not going to discuss pricing over Instagram. If you are serious, you will come in and even over email. I don't
Mm-mm.
talk about it because if pricing is that important to them, that means that person's shopping around
Absolutely.
and they're not really in it for the result.
Yeah.
They're basing off of the price. They don't really care about you. And that sounds very callous and rude, but that's just over the years kind of what I figured out. And so that's a boundary that I set up with myself is that I won't talk about pricing and I won't give out pricing.
Totally. The only exception that I'll make to that is if someone messages me, and I've had this happen a few times where they'll be like, "Hey, I have an appointment booked with you. You were referred to me by this person. So excited to meet you. Just wanted to plan ahead. How much should I plan on spending?" Then I'll like kind of give just generalities of like, well, in a first time appointment, this is how much most people end up spending.
Yeah.
And that way it's set high. And then if they come in and it's less, then that's great.
Yeah.
But the appointment's booked,
Yeah. That's the difference is that the appointment's booked, the intention is there.
Mhm. What do you do? Okay, I have an interesting scenario.
Okay.
So, what do you
Hit
do?
me.
I have a patient who came in for a consult.
Hmm.
She was very upfront about the fact that she is going to other places to do a couple consults, but that she really liked me and thinks that she's going to come back. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I like that you're doing your due diligence, made her feel very comfortable about that, not awkward at all. And then I get a text at 5 o'clock and it's, can I call you? I have more questions because she
No.
had consults in the same day, mine and then someone else's. So I know what's happening. She wants me to call her and basically tell her why my treatment plan's different than this other person. And so she called, and then she calls me at like 7. I didn't answer. But I'm going back and forth on, should I call her? Like, should I, I don't know. How would you handle that?
Like, the thing that first thing I thought of is if you didn't know that she was talking to a couple other people, how would you handle that? If you didn't know that and you thought that it was just you that she came and saw?
Oh, that's a good question. I would probably do a quick phone call or
Yeah.
an email or something.
Sure, yeah, like, whatever I think whatever feels good with you and feels authentic to you,
Yeah.
that's what I would say. I like honesty, I come from an honest place, but it makes me feel like I'm on The Bachelor, man. The Bachelor
Yeah.
objectors.
Yeah.
Like, pick me
Exactly.
who's gonna get the rose,
Totally.
and I understand these are big procedures, and they're expensive, and they're risky, I acknowledge all of that. I think it's okay to have expectations. I mean, you and I both give complimentary consultations, and that's very kind.
Yeah. And I spent an hour with her.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I answered all her questions.
So, what I think would be great is maybe if you say, rather than what's on your mind, like you can say, so we talked about XYZ thing in our consultation. Is there anything you need clarification on?
Oh,
So then we're not talking about other people's
that's a good
treatment plans.
boundary.
You do not want to get into the can of worms of talking about other people's treatment plans and being like, well, their syringe of bloom is 750 and yours is
Oh,
800.
yeah. No,
Can you tell me
no.
what that $50 difference is?
Oh,
No. We
totally.
talked about pricing. This is my pricing. This is what you can expect. You can use outlay points, whatever.
Right.
But
I like that.
just ask, yeah, just act like she didn't talk to anyone else. I do think that that's like kind of a funny thing. It's happened to me before too. I had a patient, and the reason that I entertained it and I felt like I was invested in her shopping around is because she was trans
Oh,
and she was
okay.
going through facial feminization.
Mm,
And so she had surgery, and her plastic surgeon had recommended that she start to get injectables, and she was trying to find the best people. And so I felt really honored that she considered me in that journey for her. And she actually did end up coming and seeing me. And that made me feel really special. And it was really awesome to be a part of that with her. But I feel like that was like a very one-off scenario
totally.
where it totally validated her interviewing people because that
Yeah.
was her appearance.
And she needed to make sure that she was emotionally safe.
Yeah, and I told her, I was like, "Absolutely. I wanna make sure I'm the right person for this very, very delicate, important job to you
Yeah.
for you." I was like, "Whoever you choose is very lucky to take part of this." So when you stop communicating, this can also be a toughie. This is a boundary that you set with yourself, and it's one that you also set with your clients. So make a time. This is when it's awesome to have Open Phone. Our little plug for Open Phone. We are not sponsored. It's changed our lives. So with Open Phone, you can have a text message automated at a certain time. And then also you can screen those calls and texts. But the best thing that I love about Open Phone is that you can look on text message, screen it, and then leave it unread.
Mhm.
Love that. So then it's not like DMs, like you don't lose it.
Right.
You need to be strict with yourself about what you will answer about. But if it's somebody saying, like we said like a couple episodes ago, what are your specials? And it's 7 a.m. on a Sunday, like you don't have to respond to that right away.
Totally.
They can email you or look at your email list if you're on it. And when and what you'll respond to. That's what that comes down to also. Of course, if somebody sends you a picture and they're like, hey, this looks funky, and they clearly are having an occlusion, you better respond to them and you better get your ass into the office
Yes.
within reason or send them to the ER. Also consider the different levels of accessibility, like what we were talking with Kristen's situation, that I'm so happy that she was vulnerable and shared because I think it's probably going to happen to one of us. And I mean,
Mhm.
that's also an example of your boundaries and your ability to answer DMs and all that really changes and evolves as your practice grows.
Totally.
So that special treatment that that client got is probably not sustainable in the long run. So you guys are renegotiating expectations with each other.
Absolutely.
DMs are literally the devil.
Yeah, and what sucked is, like, I do try to make it pretty clear, like, here are other options to book with me.
Yeah.
So, but that was I take full responsibility. We had the conversation on DMs. I never once said, "Please book online," or "Please
Yeah.
text this number." So, I can understand that her expectation was that she would have been responded to. But you know what? We're human, right? And we make
Mhm.
mistakes, we miss things, and you can only do so much, and when things fall apart, you just try to pivot, but definitely a boundary that I'm gonna be establishing with patients for their own good from now on. So that way I don't have to stress about missed appointments. They don't have to feel neglected or that something's getting messed up. It'll benefit everybody.
Yeah. And the other thing that I've found too is that if I book people manually, I forget to tell them to do their medical profile. And then I look at my schedule and I'm like, why is this person not cleared? Because I clear my own patients and I have the luxury, so I can be a little lazy about that. And then I'm like, oh my God, I didn't tell them to do a medical profile. I don't know their medical history just because it slips my brain. So I can understand how it seems cold and impersonal to say my link is in my bio. You don't have to do it like that.
Mhm.
You can have what is called a canned response, copy and paste, like what Kristen said. So excited to meet you. It's easiest to view my schedule and find a time that's convenient for you on my website. It does require making a quick medical profile, just make it sound fun, lighthearted,
Mhm.
and always end it with, if you need any assistance, please call or text me at this number. My assistant and I will be happy to help you. It
Totally.
leaves the
That's
door open.
perfect.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What we want to end with is, how do you know if your boundaries are being crossed? Because we know what it's like to feel upset. We know what it's like to feel frustrated with work. And most of us know what it feels like to feel burnt out. And I think having your boundaries crossed is a big part of burnout as well.
Mhm. Totally.
But like, Kristen, what's the first thing that you would say?
So if you're sitting here and you're listening to this episode and you're like, that all sounds great, and I feel like I need boundaries, but I don't know what those boundaries should be, take note of the times during your day where you may feel angry, you may feel prolonged resentment, you just feel that sense of irritation. But if you start to notice a pattern of things happening, those could be areas where your boundaries are being violated. And, if you are resentful that your front desk staff keeps bugging you on your lunch break, instead of just being angry about it, a huge sign that you need the boundary of, when I am on my lunch break, unless it's an emergency, I am not to be communicated with, and then communicate that. So it's a great way for you to realize what boundaries need to be set and then create that according to how you're feeling.
Because unfortunately, and I don't need to make people feel like it's their fault, but if you continue to respond to somebody's need and you're resentful about it, nothing will ever change.
Mhm.
You have to be the one to instill that change. Otherwise, everything will remain the same. And it's because you won't set that boundary. The other person is going to be like, great, this is benefiting me. So I'll just
Yeah.
continue on.
Or they may think like, "Oh, I'm doing a really good job. I'm being so diligent
Yes.
in informing you of what's going on." And in the meantime, you're sitting there like, "This bitch." And so
Let me eat my
yeah,
pasta.
all it takes is a simple conversation and a simple boundary, and everybody's life is improved.
Yeah, totally. And then with boundaries, I find that there's a pattern, and you can find a pattern in feeling that way. And I think we all have days where we feel like on top of the world and we feel like everything is really fluid and feels really good. Note those days and what went well those days and like what those days looked like. And also when you're having a not great day, see why, write it down. And it's kind of harder for me to notice a pattern until I write it down. So I like to keep a calendar when I'm feeling these ways and write down what bothered me. And or with clients, I'll write a little internal note about if they tried to late cancel, if they rescheduled a couple times. Just notice those patterns within days and within client experiences and set your boundaries accordingly. So for example, contacting that client that has late canceled a couple times and say, hey, I understand things happen. However, I have a $150 cancellation fee within 24 hours. Of course, I know emergencies happen. So please let me know if that's that, but I will be enforcing this going forward.
Yeah, and it may
Fine. Yeah.
evoke total anxiety in you to do that, but again, setting that boundary, the temporary anxiety of that, what's worst case scenario? They don't reschedule. Well, that's okay. They were probably gonna no-show on you anyways,
Right.
you
Exactly.
know?
Yeah. So, yeah, whatever. And then if you are feeling anxious when you're interacting with certain clients and coworkers, I think that's something to take note of as well with, is a boundary being respected, violated, and Kristen, what would you say is one of the most common ways that you can think of that within coworkers boundaries being violated?
Oh, I think time.
Time, that's a good one. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I think that's a huge one of just expectation of time is probably in my experience at least. What about you?
The first thing I thought of, if you work with multiple people and they walk in during your treatments.
Oh, what do you mean?
Does that happen or is it just in my brain? If they need something from you, like say that I'm being employed
Oh,
as an NP and then somebody needs a clearance or a GFE. I don't really know how that works in a
oh,
medical setting,
okay.
but they walk in and they say, we need you right now. And you're like, well, you're ruining my client experience.
Gotcha. So that doesn't really happen to me or it hasn't in previous places. I think because nobody needed me.
That's great.
It would make
That's a good thing.
sense.
Yeah.
For you, that would make more sense. Like, okay, yeah, there's somebody in this office that would need you. Like,
Mhm.
you get it remotely, so like text and like that kind of thing. So I get
Yeah.
that.
And as an NP, what I think of too, and this is one that's kind of niche, but I think that will resonate with some people. If you are an advanced practice provider and you work with other nurses or whatever, and it's expected that you will not only write prescriptions for the clients, but you will write prescriptions for them.
Hmm.
That is not just a boundary being violated. That is your ethics being violated, and it is a violation of your respect. And it's really offensive, to be honest. And it happens more often. It's happened to me. It's happened to me recently. And that is one boundary that it is okay to upkeep. And that's one that I'm pretty rigid about.
Absolutely, as you should be.
Yeah, and so it's okay, and you might get pushback and be like, "Well," for example, somebody might be like, "Well, my last place, we all wrote prescriptions for each other." Well, great, I don't work at that last place.
Totally.
Just have the confidence. Even if you don't feel like you have it, fake the confidence.
Hmm.
It's very rare after that say that somebody will continue to push back. They'll go find someone else. It's not a big deal, but you don't want to be that person.
And you can always like find ways of wording your response in a way that makes them feel like, oh, shit,
Silly.
I shouldn't have asked
Yeah,
that.
totally. Silly, I know. And with clients too, I mean, it's that's a toughie for sure. But if you feel anxious leading up to an appointment with a certain client because you wonder if they're going to no show, you don't know how they're going to treat you, or they don't treat your support staff well, if you have support staff, that's something that's really easy to address and also have concrete examples ready to go so they can't really question it. It's just objective.
Absolutely.
Never let them abuse the support staff ever,
Ever.
ever.
That is a hard boundary.
That is a hard boundary for
Yeah,
me as well.
that is a no-go. And the best way to get good at practicing boundaries in your professional life is to practice them in your personal life. And so in your relationships, friendships, parenting, mother, daughter, father, son relationships, all of that, great ways to practice for your business relationships. And I think it's really hard to set boundaries in your
Yeah, it is.
personal life. So if you can do it there and have the autonomy and like gain the confidence to do it in your personal life, you are going to be that much more confident going into your business life, setting some boundaries.
Preach. Yeah. It's easier to practice it with people that love you.
Yes,
You've got that safety net. And also, there's nothing financial involved usually with those people either. So it takes that big aspect out of it as well.
absolutely. There's less to lose.
Less to lose. That's exactly
Yeah.
what I would say too. Yeah. So boundaries are important. That's the takeaway here.
Yes,
Instill them, have them, love them.
absolutely. And if you guys need some resources for boundaries, we'll include that in the show notes,
Yeah.
like a few podcast episodes, a couple books that I've read, just to kind of help get you guys started on your boundary journey. And us and another coworker have hashtagged boundary babes.
It's boundary babes.
So we've been saying that to each other the last couple of weeks as we've personally and professionally had to set different boundaries. It'll just be a quick hashtag like boundary babes. And it is just that reminder, like you're worth it. It's working. And I think that's probably why our week's been better.
Yeah, I would
Some
say so
boundaries.
too. Yeah. And
Just set
also,
professional boundaries.
if you set professional boundaries, it's easier to not break them if you do them with someone else. So,
Yes.
so when I don't take my admin days, Kristen holds me accountable.
Absolutely.
She's like, "It's Wednesday. Why are you seeing clients?" And I'm like, "Oh, I have no excuse." So that's another little quick tip. If you can do it with a friend, then it's way easier to not go back on it. You can be accountability buddies, accountability babes,
Accountability babes, boundary babes.
boundary babes. Well, this was, I think, a much needed topic. We hope that it helped you. It was kind of cathartic for me.
Yeah, it was good just to like be reminded of how important they really are. And
Really.
there's only good things on the other side of a boundary, babes.
As much as we don't like DMs, slide into our DMs,
Yeah.
please.
We will respond
We will
at
respond.
all hours of the night.
Oh God, if only. Slide into our DMs. We would love to hear from you. I mean, honestly, hearing from you guys is just like so cool and full circle. So we love every moment of it.
And thank you guys so much for those of you who've been so supportive of the podcast
Yes.
so far, sharing on your stories. Of course, we would love it if we're getting to that point where I think we're going to start saying subscribe and review.
If you write a 5-star review, we'll love you.
We'll be so happy because this really truly is a labor of love for you guys.
Totally.
And on the flip side, maybe don't write this in a review, but tell us in a DM how we can improve. What topics do you want to
Imagine
hear?
if it was in a review?
Oh my gosh, please don't, guys. Please don't.
No.
Not yet. We'll be open to your critiques, but just let us know what you want to hear, and we are here for it. Have a great week, guys.
Have a great week. See ya.